We have already mentioned that there are types of companies that pay corporate tax. In today's episode, we are going to focus on corporate tax and what you need to know about it.
Welcome to the Business Lessons in Denmark podcast. Our podcast gives the answers to your business-related questions that have not been answered yet, or things that haven't even crossed your mind. My name is Edina Bohos, and I am here with my colleague, Katalin Balog. We are owners of Kullakan CPS, Danish accounting office. Hi, Kati. We mentioned in an earlier episode that not all business owners pay taxes on their profits as individuals in their personal tax returns. There are certain company forms that pay corporate tax. Most people probably know, or at least have heard, the term corporate tax, but let's take a closer look at what it is.
Yes, there are forms of business that are considered corporations, selskab in Danish, and these businesses pay corporate tax on their profits.
I guess that these are the limited liability company and the joint stock company called APS and AS in Danish.
Correct. Indeed, these two company forms are considered corporations, just as the finances of the company and the finances of the owners are separate from each other in these companies, so are the taxation of the company and the taxation of the owners. The company itself pays corporate tax on its profits, and the owners as individuals pay taxes on dividends received from the profits on their salary if they are also employed in the company.
I understand. And what is the corporate tax rate in Denmark?
22%.
Okay, let's say that I have an APS to operate my small guest house, then I will have to pay corporate tax on the profits of this APS. My total income was 1 million crowns because I had many well-paying guests. Of course, I also had some expenses because I had employees to whom I paid salaries. I had to pay insurance, and for bookkeeping, I had to buy food for the kitchen. There were water, electricity, and heating costs, and so on. So I had quite a lot of costs after all. Let's say that I had expenses for 900,000 crowns. So if I calculate correctly, I have 100,000 crowns left as profit in my small guest house, and then I have to pay 22% of this as corporate tax. That is 22,000 crowns.
Yes, exactly. You calculated correctly.
Yes. And what will happen with the remaining 78,000 crowns?
Well, you as the owner decide what will happen with it. You can take it out as dividend, but you can also leave it in the company for later. You can also take part of it out as dividend, and the rest you can just leave in the company.
Okay, I see. We can see that these 78,000 crowns are the fruit of my work, and I decide if I want to enjoy it or now, or if I want to build my company so the fruit will be even bigger later.
Yes, that's right. You decide if you eat the cherry now or if you let it grow and see if it turns into a watermelon.
Cherries have never turned into watermelons, but okay, I see what you mean. When we talked about personal taxes, the system worked in such a way that one had to pay advance tax during the year. And when the year was over, one had to do the tax return and settle the tax. If one paid too much advance tax, then one got money back. If one paid too little, one had to pay back taxes. Is there a similar system for corporate tax?
Yes. A corporation also has to make a tax return, and exactly as you say, advance tax must be paid during the year, and at the end of the year, after the tax return is done, the remainder must be settled. For corporate tax, you have to pay advance tax 2 times, in March and in November. And then in February, in the following year, you can also make a voluntary payment to make sure that you pay enough tax in advance. Because if you haven't paid enough tax in advance, there certainly will be an interest here as well. So my best advice is to be smart, keep an eye on the books and see how the profit is going, and then pay the advance tax accordingly.
Yes, that's a good idea. And when is the deadline?
Within 6 months after your financial year ends.
There is no specific date?
No, because when you have a corporation, you decide when your financial year starts and when it ends, of course. You decide if you want to follow the calendar year, that is from 1st of January until the 31st of December, or would you rather have some other time period?
Wow, interesting. Can I choose that the financial year for my guest house should start on the 1st of May and end on the 30th of April in the following year?
Yeah.
And yeah, okay. So my accounting would follow this period. So my profit will be what I make between May and April.
Yes, exactly. If you choose this time period, then you will need to do the tax return for your company within 6 months after the 30th of April, so no later than the 31st of October. But if your financial year is the same as the calendar year, and many companies choose this solution, then you will have to file your corporate tax return latest the 30th of June.
Okay, and are there certain deductions here as there were for personal taxes?
Well, primarily the expenses that you had in your company, that is those things that were directly necessary for getting, maintaining, or increasing your income. Just as you mentioned before, it certainly costs you quite a lot of money in your guest house to make sure that your guests can sleep in the freshly washed bed linen or smell the delicious coffee on the breakfast table and so on. These things cost obviously things, so this will reduce the tax base. And there are also other things. For example, if your company had a loss in a previous year or years, you can deduct the loss from the current profit. So you will pay less taxes in the current year. In addition, there are some special things that work in that direction also, like, for example, there is a discount for research and experimentation expenses.
I understand. Well, this is a very interesting universe with its own time. In any case, the payment of corporate tax also has its own logic, as I see it, just like the other types of taxes that we have discussed so far.
Yes, absolutely.
We have been talking about taxes for several episodes now, and in connection with this, I would like to touch on one more thing. Taxes must be paid, of course. Everybody knows that, but still there are usually ways to reduce one's taxes, and it's natural that one would like to utilize those ways.
Yes. When a person goes into shady things with taxes or distorts reality or lies, sometimes even to himself or herself, tries to hide things, these things are illegal. And such strategies always end badly, one way or another. On the other hand, there is absolutely no problem with optimizing one's taxes within the limits of the law. That is, to shape one's life, one's business and affairs in such a way that it is favorable as possible. In other words, it is completely all right to make maximum use of the legal possibilities, which certainly also exist in Denmark. to ultimately be able to keep more money for oneself or to keep more money in one's company.
Yes, that's where one has to be very familiar with the law and the tax rules, because as you said, there is indeed some room for maneuver.
Sure. Tax optimization is usually a complex task. Obviously, someone's financial situation and their personal circumstances must be examined very carefully in order to discover the areas where we would advise that, well, it would be more appropriate to do this a little differently, or this or that should be done in another way, because then it would mean some savings.
Yes, I understand. Well, yes, this tax optimization obviously requires personalized advice due to individual circumstances, but could we still give the listeners some general good advice besides booking an appointment with us?
Yes, I could actually give many pieces of general advice, but let's take the most basic one, which is do not turn your back on this area. There are some people who would rather not even hear the word tax because it seems so complicated, terrifying, or painful that they prefer not to deal with it at all. But when you don't want to deal with it, it is exactly there that you might become forced to deal with it anyway. And by the time it might even be painful.
Yeah, the ostrich policy is not the best solution in this case because fear of something often comes from a lack of knowledge. In any case, we try to contribute with our own means to make the Danish tax system seem less complicated or terrifying.
Yes. And if you feel like getting your tax affairs reviewed or start wondering if there could be some areas that could be optimized, then
yes, then you know how to find us. Thanks, Kati, for today's information. We also thank the listener for listening to us. Next week we will come back with another interesting topic. Today's episode was sponsored by Kulokan CPS. Kulokan CPS can help with starting your company with bookkeeping and tax matters. In addition, we also provide business and financial consulting. If you don't want to miss useful and up-to-date information, follow us and like our Facebook page. You can contact us via our website www.accounts.cool. We wish you a successful week.